Much like Who Was Prince explores the life of Prince and his influences, Remy Martin joins with international music star Usher in Team Up for Excellence, the film, exploring the history of music, culture, and cognac. See the film at teamupforexcellence.com. Remy Martin Cognac, 40% alcohol by volume, imported by Remy Cointreau, USA, New York, New York. Please drink responsibly.
Good morning, peeps, and welcome to Woke AF Daily with me, your girl, Danielle Moody, recording live from our Podstream studios here in Times Square. You know, folks, it has been another extraordinary week in America, and what we know now, with just a couple of days into September, is that children at a very high rate are contracting COVID-19. We are seeing in a 1 week span, I want everybody to wrap their minds around this, in a 1 week span, 250,000 kids across the country contracted COVID-19. Now, while hospitalizations of these young people remains low, it is in fact surging. Where before in 2020 with the Alpha variant, we were told, right? And again, I am not putting any blame on scientists or doctors. They are learning as they are going, and it requires all of us to be intellectually nimble, right? To adapt to information that we are getting and move with that new information. With the Alpha variant in 2020, we were told that children were really not susceptible, that they were fine, and they had the immune systems to be able to fight off COVID. Well, push forward, I should say, a year later, and we are in an entirely different place with an entirely new variant. And right now, there are roughly a little over 2,000 children across the country that are hospitalized. And you are hearing from pediatric doctors telling us that children's hospitals are getting to capacity, which they've never seen. And what we know to be true is this, is that when we are dealing with hospitals that are at capacity with COVID, that other ailments that people are coming in with, that children are coming in with, are not being treated. So what does that say about this kind of domino effect that is happening with our healthcare right now as it pertains to kids? Something else is very notable, and it is the constant, I got to tell you this, it's incredibly troubling to me that we are having just a couple of days since school has begun across the country, that there's a school in San Antonio, Texas, where every kindergarten teacher has contracted COVID. And get this, the school did not alert parents to that fact. And as a matter of fact, the students and the teachers basically have to rely on the trust that they have in the institution to tell them what's what, because they're relying on each other because they're getting mixed messages. Why are they getting mixed messages? Probably because they live in the fucking state of Texas, where Abbott, right, the executioner of Texas, has decided to not include mask mandates, right? To make it so that we don't have social distancing in schools, to make it so that students, right, can be harassed by adults as they're heading into the building, so that people can totally begin to threaten and attack all of these school administrators that are trying to keep their kids safe. Well, without anybody's mandates and with the fear of losing income if you are sued, right, or your salaries are cut like Death Santis is doing in Florida, teachers, parents, students are all left juggling a bunch of balls in the air and hoping that they don't just drop on their heads. It is incredibly disgusting to me that parents are being put in a situation where, you know, we're basically allowing these governors to play Russian roulette with your lives. So the school that I'm talking about is Kinder Ranch Elementary, and it is in San Antonio. And it was being reported by an epidemiologist and health economist, Eric Fagel-Ding, on Twitter, and it was also posted on mysanantonio.com, that how parents discovered the fact that their kids were exposed to COVID. I mean, this is just bullshit, folks. Like, I can't imagine the anxiety and the stress that parents and caregivers are having right now, just hoping to God that the teachers and the administrators where they are dropping their kids off are doing the right thing. And clearly at this place where, again, we're in Texas, so there are no vaccine mandates. There are no mask mandates. There is nothing. You're just crossing your fingers and kind of pushing your kids through the door and hoping that they come back what? Well, and here's the thing. Even if we are at a situation and a place where we're saying, okay, well, I guess 3,000 hospitalizations for kids across the country is not that big of a deal, which is outrageous for these quote unquote, pro-forced birth folks who are all about telling me and telling every woman and telling everybody with a uterus what they can and cannot do, right, to protect life. Fucking bullshit. Because if they were really interested in protecting life, you tell me why they wouldn't be on the side of mask mandates, why they wouldn't be on the side of vaccinations to keep everybody safe, since, life is so precious and all given to you by the great Lord above. Fucking hypocrisy. And I want Democrats to call out the hypocrisy on a day-to-day basis. And frankly, I want these parents, right, that are concerned about the well-being of their kids to sue the fucking school district. Because if I were a parent at Kinder Elementary School, I would absolutely be suing this school district. Because how are you not sending emails or text messages or making phone calls to let people know exactly what is happening? Right? Why are they finding out? Why are these parents finding out through the grapevine, like a game of telephone with other parents to find out whether or not they're safe? And mind you, these kids are coming home. Some of these kids live in intergenerational homes, right? So what does that mean about the safety of the adults in those homes? We are at an infuriating place when it comes to COVID-19, because what I fear and what I continue to say and what our friend Dr. Jonathan Metzl tells us is that the middle of October is going to tell us a whole fucking lot about what it is that American school systems are doing completely and totally wrong. Folks, coming up next is my conversation with American University professor David Vine, who is going to talk about, and I'm very interested in this conversation, about his new book, The United States of War. It is a third in a trilogy of books about war and peace and our obsession with empire building in this country and our militarized society. That is coming up next.
Remy Martin joins with international music star Usher in Team Up for Excellence, the film, exploring the history of music, culture, and cognac, from blues to hip-hop, swing dancing to breakdancing. Usher and Remy Martin traveled through the decades in France and the U.S., honoring cultural figures, both rooted in a shared philosophy of aiming for the stars. See the film at teamupforexcellence.com. Remy Martin Cognac, 40% alcohol by volume, imported by Remy Cointreau, USA, New York, New York. Please drink responsibly.
Folks, I am so excited to welcome to Woke AF for the very first time David Vine, professor of anthropology at American University and the author of The United States of War, which is a provocative examination of how the U.S. military has shaped our entire world, from today's multi-trillion-dollar decades-long wars to the prominence of violence. David, we're talking to you at a really interesting time, and obviously your book is incredibly timely, with our recent withdrawal from Afghanistan, America's longest war. For 20 years, we have been fighting alongside Afghans to defend against the Taliban and to bring some type of semblance of democracy. But in that time, what we realized is, as the withdrawal was being announced, that within weeks, 20 years of effort, 20 years of lives lost on both sides of the conflict, whether it be Afghan civilians or American military members, it was all poof, gone within weeks. And now the Taliban has full control over a country that the United States had supposedly been keeping safe for the last 20 years. Before we jump into your book, The United States of War, what were your feelings when you heard about the withdrawal happening? And then, honestly, what are your thoughts about how the withdrawal actually happened and whether or not we should have been in Afghanistan to begin with?
I think those are all the right questions. First, thank you, Danielle, for having me. I'm really excited to speak with you. I supported and support President Biden's withdrawal from Afghanistan. I think it was the right thing to do. I think the withdrawal itself was handled poorly on the whole. I think, evacuating upwards of 114,000 Afghans plus several thousand more from Afghanistan was impressive in a very short period of time. But the chaos that followed the formal withdrawal of most of the US military from Afghanistan did not need to happen and should have been better with the Taliban. Now, that said, the war should never have been fought. This was not a war for democracy. This was not a war to protect Afghans. This was a war that was fought for a variety of reasons having to do with the Bush and Cheney administration desire for revenge, supported by large segments of the US population. But it was Barbara Lee, of course, the one member of Congress, stood up and opposed the war in Afghanistan, who, of course, was right from the beginning. And there were others, anti-war movement brewing then, and that was speaking out. But this was a war that was built on lies, 20 years, lies about the progress of the war, lies that the war was indeed to bring democracy and peace and freedom and security to Afghans. This was a war that I think is more appropriately characterized as a massive wealth transfer. Robert Reich has described
Wow.
that literally trillions of dollars, 2.3 trillions of trillion dollars, 2.3 trillion with a T dollars that went to funding the US war in Afghanistan. The vast majority of it ended up in the coffers of the military industrial complex, weapons manufacturers. And this is, I think, the major effect of the war, in addition to taking the lives of 600,000 Afghans. That includes those who died in indirect means. The lives of US military personnel and contractors. Each death, each injury is a terrible cost of this war. But we have to keep our eyes first and foremost on the damage that's been inflicted on Afghans, which is really catastrophic and which continues and will continue after the US withdrawal.
You know, to listen to you say that essentially, and I'm going to paraphrase, this was a money laundering scheme, right? A 2.3 trillion with a T dollar money laundering scheme. My question to you about it is how was this able to survive over 4 presidents, right? On Republican and Democrats. How was this able to survive for that many years, knowing that, I mean, do we not provide progress reports with the military? Do they not let us know how efforts are going on the ground? And so then we can then analyze whether it makes sense to keep expending the money, keep expending the life and the energy force in order to be in a situation that we know that we can't change.
I think the short answer is lies and credit cards. Now, lies mean we were given progress reports. We were given by generals and admirals and civilian government officials who consistently lied about the progress, consistently lied about how things were going in this war. And the Washington Post, Afghanistan papers, they sort of echoed the Pentagon papers of the Vietnam era. The Afghanistan showed these lies, and I would recommend to anyone. This, of course, came after the Washington Post and other major news outlets were really cheerleaders in Afghanistan and Iraq. Years later, they, of course, cast a more critical eye. The credit card part, that these wars, the war in Afghanistan, but also the US war in Iraq and all the post 9/11 wars in 25 countries where US combat troops have been deployed, these have been fought on a credit card, which is to say that administrations have, and Congresses behind them, have charged the cost of these wars rather than raising taxes, which is
Mm.
how they've been fought in the past, where US citizens felt the effects of these wars, the potential effect of going to war. In the case of the post 9/11 wars, these wars have been put on a credit card effectively, inflicting the cost on future generations to pay back all that. But that's another way that the wars essentially have been hidden, and a way in which four administrations have kept them going.
You know, I just find it so atrocious. The amount of money that our tax dollars, the amount of tax dollars that are funneled into our military industrial complex, funneled into the Pentagon, and I think about what it is we don't spend money on, right? We're always told that there isn't enough. There isn't enough money to put in health and human services. There isn't enough money to put in public education. There isn't enough money to fight climate change. There's never enough money. But you know who's always like, neck deep in money is the military. So talk to us about your book, The United States of War, and how you think that the military and the militarization of our police, right, which we saw during for the first time, really, I think, up close during Ferguson in 2014, when we're seeing the fact that our local police departments had all the latest GI Joe outfits, as well as tanks, as well as weaponry that you would see in an Afghanistan, as opposed to a suburb of the United States. Talk to us about how this militarization has happened over the years and how it has accelerated.
I think the militarization of the police is actually a really good example, and terrible, atrocious example, as you said, of how the post 9/11 wars and a much longer process of militarization that dates to independence in some ways, as I show in my book, the United States of War really dates to Columbus arriving in the Americas.
Mm.
It's an example of how this has come back to bite us here in the United States. The effects of these wars have been felt not just by people in Afghanistan or Iraq or Syria or Yemen, Libya, Somalia, Philippines, and on. They've been felt here in the streets of the United States and have damaged our lives in profound ways, beginning with the money that has been spent on these wars. In total, the post 9/11 wars have cost US taxpayers $8 trillion. $8 trillion. And that is really a hard sum to comprehend. But I think, as you rightfully pointed out, so frequently when people were asking for money for universal health care or universal education, the universal college, that is, for to house the homeless, to make sure that there's no one in this country who goes hungry, to rebuild bridges and streets and other infrastructure, public transportation, we're told there isn't enough money. There's always been enough money. We've invested $8 trillion in war since 2001. In total, that's just the war budgets. In total, if you include the regular, quote unquote, regular Pentagon budget, it's $21 trillion that the
No.
US government, yes. I mean, it's mind boggling, and should really make us weep. I mean, how many, literally hundreds of thousands of people died of COVID because we didn't invest even a small portion of that 8 trillion, just take the 8 trillion alone, in pandemic preparedness, because we didn't invest in PPE, because we didn't invest in ventilators, because we didn't invest in vaccine production capacity. And then we think about how many people have died because we don't have universal health care in this country, or how many people have died sleeping on the streets at night in places like Washington, D.C. It's really, it should make us weep. And as I show in my book, The United States of War, this is a long-term process, especially since World War II, dominated by an increasingly powerful military-industrial complex that is so addicted to war. There's so many profits to be made from war. it has created a self-perpetuating system that we have to break. We have to bring down the military-industrial complex. Otherwise, we're going to keep fighting. And that's my greatest fear, that we're going to end up in another Afghanistan, another Iraq, which really, in my mind, all the post 9/11 wars are our Vietnam. For those of us who grew up after the Vietnam War, this is our Vietnam. It's not recognized as such, but the damage that's been inflicted is just as great. And we're going to end up in yet another Vietnam, another Afghanistan, another Iraq, if we don't change the underlying system of the military-industrial complex and a system of permanent war.
This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Football is back, and the best bet you can make is downloading the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It doesn't matter if you're new to gambling or an old pro, FanDuel has something for everyone. And as an official sports betting partner of the NFL, you know your bets are safe. There's also never been a better time to use FanDuel, because right now, you'll get up to $1,000 back if your first bet doesn't win. You can even turn a small wager into a big payday with a same-game parlay bet. Just sign up with the promo code Spotify to place your first bet risk-free on FanDuel Sportsbook. Download FanDuel today. 21 plus and present in Virginia. First online real money wager only. Refund issued as non-withdrawable site credit that expires in 14 days. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
That's it for today's Woke AF Daily Podcast. To hear more from today's show, including my full interview with David Vine, support me on Patreon at patreon.com/wokeaf. Power to the people, and to all the people power. Get woke and stay woke as fuck.
Remy Martin joins with international music star Usher in Team Up for Excellence, the film, exploring the history of music, culture, and cognac, from blues to hip-hop, swing dancing to breakdancing. Usher and Remy Martin travel through the decades in France and the U.S., honoring cultural figures, both rooted in a shared philosophy of aiming for the stars. See the film at teamupforexcellence.com. Remy Martin Cognac, 40% alcohol by volume, imported by Remy Cointreau, USA, New York, New York. Please drink responsibly.